Hey guys, welcome back to Alice Customs Project Car TV. I'm working on the Dodge Dakota again, and yes, we're at the back of the truck again. I know in the last video I said the rear suspension is done, we're moving on to the front. Well, we're not. Not yet, maybe tomorrow. What's going on is we got everything done, we're ready to order our shocks, and we made the decision to add a sway bar. And what I've bought is a Horton's Welder series kit. Pretty simple, really. It comes with a sleeve that we're going to cut this piece in half. It'll go in the frame, and then there's a poly bushing that goes in one end. This piece of steel rod, which I believe this one's the 3/4 inch. He only makes 2 kits, but because he uses a very common size tubing, you could also buy different bushings and put a different rod on there. And he sells you arms that will be the sway bar link arm, and you can get those in different links. So I picked a kit that I thought would work best for this truck, and I believe everything's going to fit the way I'm hoping, or was in hopes of when I ordered it. You can also get this to where it's a full-length tube, but because of the design we're using, we elected just to save a little money and do a short piece of tubing for the bushing. It comes as a complete kit. It gives you the end links. It gives you, there's some end links and tabs to weld to the axle. So it's a complete kit, but it is a weld it yourself kit. Now he's out of Canada, so when you look at the prices, they're in Canadian dollars. So when you get it's 15 to 20% cheaper than what you see on the website, unless you switch over. I don't even know if you can switch over to US dollar, but I'm assuming you're in the US. If you're in Canada, then price is the price. But I've talked to the guys there a couple times. They've been very helpful, especially with this kit. If you remember, we did a C10 pickup a few years ago for Randy where we did a 4-link. That was a Welder series, a Paul Horton's Welder series kit that we bought. And they customized that because we were changing up the top links a little bit and angles, and the length was getting longer than their standard kit. So I just told them what I needed. They sent me the tubing, the links I wanted. I'm kind of ready. I've kind of played with it. I've had the axle all the way up, all the way down to, and so I'm pretty sure I have everything figured out where my pieces of tubing need to go and where the sway bar is going to go. Now, because we have no room on the outside of the frame here because of the coilovers, I'm going to be putting the arms on the inside. So it's a little bit different design, but it should work just fine. We'll get everything kind of situated where we think it needs to be, then we'll tack it and then make sure before we actually do any final welding on any of the kit. So anyway, I think it's going to come out, I think it's going to work the way I've designed it in my head. So now we just got to make it, we just got to make that happen. Before I started the video, I did a little bit of work to get things ready. This bracket that's holding the brake line used to be over here. I cut that loose, re-welded it. It's the same soft tube. I did have to cut the hard line and re-flare it. I just used the factory flare, or the factory nut, so all that went fine. Just put a little brake fluid down on the ground, but we'll clean that up. My thinking is, because of this bracket, we want to be pretty much over the top of the axle so that we got as much clearance as we can. And this tube is going to be mounted about this high, to where I'm actually going to end up cutting part of the frame, top rail of the frame out, so that that will fit in there. Then the bushing will be on the inside. Remember, this tubing I said is going to be cut down to half length, so it'll be just outside of the frame rail. And then this arm goes on with a collar, and you're going to slide this on, have it snug up against the bushing like that. So that's going to go on there, and then the collar will be on there, and there's a hole in that collar. We weld that onto our arm in the placement we want, and then we drill through that into the sway bar itself and pin it, and that's what holds it in place. And it comes with the roll pins and everything else. So all this is going to go together, something like this. Now you can put the collar on the inside and work it there, and that would get us 1.5 inches of spacing out away from the frame, which we may need. So in that case, all we'd be doing is swapping one arm for the other side, just to put the collar wherever we want it. Oh, and then we'll drill a hole through one side of the frame so that we can feed the rod all the way through. And once we have it figured out, we'll cut it to length. There's 2 length kits you can buy, and I'm sure if you called the shop, they would custom cut this length for you if you needed a few more inches, or you needed 2 inches longer than something they already sell. I'm sure they'll work with you on that. They've been very, very good to me as far as working around my ideas. But I'm planning to run this either into the frame and just deadheading it and welding it, or I may go ahead and cut a hole big enough that this sticks through, and then you'd see the edge of the tube. But on the opposite side, we'll just dead end it. We don't need to be able to go all the way through. We'll be able to pull the pins and pull this back out one direction or the other. Mock this up a little bit. We'll go ahead and get some of this bolted together, figure out our length and where we want this, and then, like I said, we may have to move this wiring again, which we could easily do. We could run it behind this frame bracket, which might just do that anyway. It goes back here to feed the taillights. We could pull it all loose, run it on the inside of the frame rail, and then it's completely out of the way. So that's probably what our plan will actually be. Now the kit comes with nylock nuts, but it's just a 3/8 coarse bolt, so just pick up some extra nuts so that you can hook these things up as many times as you need to and not have to worry about it. I'm setting it for a 3-inch spacing, and my thinking is this is going to sit just about like this, and wanting this arm to be basically vertical at ride height, and that's what's going to dictate where my piece of tubing comes through the frame. So we're going to be somewhere right in here. Alright, so just holding this piece of tubing up after I cut it off, and then I took it over on the lathe and I cleaned up the edges on the inside, chamfered the inside edge and everything. But anyway, holding it up here where it's just going to come through the top flange, looks like about right for where I want this thing to land, and it's going to be pretty much right up against my gusset that I put in. So I just pulled it up to where it would just come through, proud a little bit. We'll cut there. Because we need this to come through, I'm going to go ahead and order. I looked these up. They're 9002. These are a energy suspension bushing. So I think I'm going to order another 2 bushings. Had I thought about it to begin with, probably would have just ordered them. I'm sure they would have, Horton's would have sent me another set. But I think I'm just going to run them to where I can put one on the outside on this side, and then I can, in the end of our sway bar here, I'm going to try and drill in and thread it, and then I can just put like a cap that would keep this bushing from walking out. But that way this end of the bushing is completely supported. On this side, closer to the camera there, I'll just hold the, I'll go through the bushing, but I won't go probably more than about halfway into the sleeve on that side of the bushing, so that it doesn't hit the inside wall of the frame. And so really I just need 1 bushing, but I'll probably order 2 or 4, just because I always like, paying shipping. A lot of times the shipping costs more than the part itself. So anyway, we're going to cut this out. I'm going to go find a hole saw that's this diameter or slightly smaller that I can run in from the outside first. Once I have that cut, then I'll connect the lines, and then we'll lay this in, tack it, and then we'll figure out on the other side. We just need to make sure we come back the same distance so that this thing is square to our suspension. The frame has all kinds of shape to it, so it's kind of hard to measure from there. And I can't even measure from like the rivets here. Might be able to measure from this slot forward. And maybe from like this slot back, and get the lines in the same place so that I'm working the same job. But let me go find a hole saw. I need to spin fairly slow, especially the bigger they get. So I just put my drill in on the low speed. Cleaned up a piece of tubing, cleaned up this, pulled the wiring out of the way. I think I got lucky and didn't damage any of the wiring itself, just the sheeting, so well, try and avoid doing any more. I'm going to pull that up into the frame, where it's tight into the frame, and I'm going to go ahead and get probably a tack on each corner there with about 1/4 inch of stick out on the frame side, on the outside out here. That'll put that where we can figure out whether we're running straight or not. So we'll get the other side centered up, and then we'll put our bushings in and try and run our sway bar through there, our bar through. And if everything lines up and it moves smooth, then we know we're straight. Otherwise, we'll come back, cut a couple of these tack wheels loose, or the other side, whichever, until we get everything where it runs nice and straight. And once it does, then we'll turn the welder up pretty good and burn these in, and then weld the outside over here. On that one, we're going to try and weld the inside, and the top rail as well. So on the other side, the slot that I cut in the top rail is 1 1/16 inches. So we're going to try and duplicate that on this side. That open, and we'll probably cut into the curve on here, because otherwise we're going to get this in there, and we either have to cut the curve of the frame into this piece of tubing, or cut that out and then we'll weld it up. So we'll have to open up the face on the other side there, but that's going to sit in there. Alright, with that tacked in, we'll let it cool for a minute. Then we're going to push the bushing in on both sides and try and slide our sway bar through there. It's going to go in about that far. So we're going to need our bushing somewhere in here. So the sway bar is in about where I want it. So now what we want is to be able to slide this bushing in here with little to no trouble. That went actually as smooth as I could hope for a first try. I think I'm going to cut these front two welds loose. I think this is sitting a little up on this outside. I think it needs to go down just a hair. Let me do that. A pair of vice grips. Spins pretty good now. Well, looking at the back side, I think I had it reversed. I think the front needed to be up. So, retack that, and then cut the back ones loose and tap them down. It's just a matter of finding that right spot. And on this side, you probably can't see it, but the back of the bar is in there about 3/8 of an inch inside. So it's like right about here, which is perfect. This is being supported here. There's plenty of support on this end, but because I want to be able to pull this out that way, I'll go ahead and do my little bushing trick over there. The reason I did the short sleeves, it saves some money both in shipping and in the kit itself. But I was afraid that if I tried to run a sleeve all the way across, which is the way the kit is actually, when you order it, that's the way it's actually designed. I was afraid that it would be in this bar, which wouldn't be that big a deal. You could come in here and notch this bar so that your sleeve would fit in there and weld, you could weld it to it, and then this bar becomes part of that sleeve, becomes part of that. But it seemed overkill, and it seemed, did it seem overkill? I don't know. Everything I do is kind of overkill. I just didn't know if I was going to need to be lower, I guess, would be really the problem. If I was dead center in here, it'd be a pain in the butt to try and notch that to get the pipe through. So I just didn't do it. We'll just leave it at that idea. I didn't do it. This is going to function very well. The other thing is because originally I was thinking I was going to put this in front and then have my arms on the outside of the frame. Well, that doesn't work because of the fuel tank. It's in the way of trying to put it anywhere, put this bar anywhere up front here, because the back of the fuel tank is over in this area. So this became the location. That made for the sleeves working, and then my arms we'll drill a hole in them, but they'll get mounted onto our axle tube. And if I could hold this straight, onto our axle tube, they'll slide on here. And this one, it'll slide right down between the support brace and this. All right, so I've drilled the holes in the arms, and I polished up this bar. Got the arms in place, and I just put a vice grip here to kind of put pressure on everything to hold it pretty close to where it should be. We've got the axle at ride height right now, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to take the coilover mock-up shocks loose, drop the axle down to where we have like 19.5 or 20 inches here, which would be 20 would be an extreme. And the thing is, we need to make sure this doesn't hit here and this arm doesn't hit on the other bar. These brackets on the axles are just tacked on, and only one of those. So we can adjust things if we need to, but this is kind of our critical moment here of did we get everything in the right place. And what we need is, like I said, about 2.5 inches of droop. So now this side is just about to touch, and the passenger side is about 1/8 of an inch off of the bar. And we've got right at 2 inches. So we're going to be a little shy, but I think we could come in and just notch this bracket if that side would get where we need it to be. What would be ideal is an arm that came out a little further on this edge and then went down. Instead of being, what, about 3 inches there, if it came out to maybe 5 inches and then turned, but ended up at the same spot, you know, if you had this hole in the same alignment, that's just 1/4 inch plate. We may just cut some new arms on our table. Sure, if I called Paul Horton's, they could make exactly what I'm after. So for me, I have a plasma table, so I could just make these in-house. But you know, if you were buying this kit and you ran into the same problem, in this case, like I said, we could notch that bracket. Wouldn't be any big deal. It's just supporting a force that's that direction and a pull this direction. So we could notch it, you know, box it in, whatever we needed to make it work. This side though, we've got a piece of tubing here, and I could come back and cut this tubing out and bend a new one and even go the other way, just come out and around. But for the amount of work for both of those, I could probably just cut 2 new arms on my table for the amount of work and time and material. So if this arm was inboard, it doesn't work to put it all the way in, like having it right up against the bushing. There's no clearance here then for the bolt head. I mean, this side wasn't too bad. I could make the clearance. That side though was going to hit in quite a few places trying to push it all the way in. But if we went and just got a piece of tubing like this and made a spacer that was half this width that pulled that in that far on both sides, that would give us the space off the frame. We could go back to with the locking collar on the outside of it, and it would just be a spacer that's riding in there, giving us a gap between our bushing and the arm. Alright, so I've been doing a little bit of fiddling here, and what I've come up with, I didn't have any tubing that was the size of this bushing that we're going to weld onto the arm, but I did have some solid round stock 1.25" aluminum. So I turned up 2 bushings. Right now these are about 0.6 inches, so just under 5/8. And I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect everything, pull the sway bar arm out again, and with these being 0.6 inches, that's gonna push the arm in a little bit, which might give us the clearance we need on this bar and the clearance we need over there. The other thing, you know, if we could shave these down a little bit, which would get us more clearance here, and we can figure out if we need to notch that, or we could always just make these links longer. These are set up to be about 3 inches, but I can find pieces and parts to make those, say, 4 inches long, which would give us an extra inch of clearance. And if these were up an extra inch at this point, we probably could get all we needed and still have the bars where we want them. We just got to make sure that when this is all the way up, which we'll check after we do the droop, that a longer link wouldn't put this arm into the bottom of the bed. That's what I'm going to do now, is put these bushings in there and see how that fits. So that gave me about, now I have about a 1/4 of an inch before the arm now hits this support bar, and it'd be a little bit more, yeah, maybe 3/8. Let's see what it does on that side. Still hard up against this. In fact, it makes it worse because we're higher up on the curve. But again, we could notch this if we could. I'd be willing to notch one side if we could get the droop out of the other side. So let me disconnect this one. And let's see if we can get this down to full droop and clear on that side. And if not, then I think what we'll do is measure what we would need for a longer link to get to full droop, and see if we couldn't just not notch this but get full droop with about 1/8 of an inch of gap, and then change the link length to get the clearance we need here at full droop. So let's see what that would do. We're in an issue now. It's hitting, and it's got the bar fully drooped out. And we're only about 1.75 inches down on this side, so yeah, the bar was actually holding it up. Guess the way we could do it, we could notch this box out and that would reach. The problem is, you can see that we're going to go over center at some point, and then we're not going to get the sway bar to work correctly, because once it goes over center, it's going to try and it's never going to want to come back this way. So what we really need is a little bit of a spacer in here, and this is probably more than we need as far as space. But then we need this arm, or this link, to be that much longer. 1 inch longer. So I've got these set up at 3 inches. You just need to make sure that's correct. I need to see if I can find probably another female, and then we just do whatever thread that is between the two females and do a stud in there. So I'll probably call Paul Horton's tomorrow and see if they've run into this issue. Maybe they can either sell me the parts or give me some part numbers, and I can just, so I'll aim for 4 1/4 to give us full droop, and then what I'll do is check to see what it is, what we can have at bump stop. And I know I'm kind of rambling, but you know, this is how you have to think through some of this stuff sometimes. So that would be full compression. And what would we have here? You know, where would we be at 4 and whatever inches I said? Oh yeah, we're still below the frame height. So yeah, easily could be 4 1/4, and that would get us the link. I'd like something that could be 4 1/4 with some adjustability, because I would like to come back and drill at least one more, if not 2 more holes in here, so that you could have some adjustability. Right now you have the most leverage on this bar with this hole. If you shortened it up, say you had 1 inch in, 1 inch in from that, you're decreasing your leverage against your sway bar, making the sway bar tighter essentially. But we'd need a longer link to make that work and not get into an over center kind of bind. Maybe we could order a couple of the different center studs, so that you could have a 4-inch version, a 5-inch, and a 6-inch, you know, so that you could have room. But we'll figure it out. But I think that's going to be better than trying to redesign this arm, especially since I don't have any 3/8 material, so I'd have to go buy it. By the time I notched this and cut that tube out and swapped it around, you know, all of these are options, but I think the cheapest, easiest option is just to swap this out, because if that's what we're going to do, I can go ahead and build these arms and have everything done, just waiting on new connecting links. Not entirely sure how much of this you can see, but we've got the arm on here. I went to the hardware store, got a coupling nut and a fine thread bolt, and just cut the head off. Basically made an extension in here. I've ordered a new female left-hand thread rod end, as well as a coupler that's male right hand and male left hand threads with a nut between them. So those pieces will be here in the next few days, but this gave me a way to go ahead and essentially get everything in its place, This is about 3/8 of an inch lower than the axle can be with the shocks at full extension. And I've got plenty of room here, plenty of room on the other side. So I've tacked in my brackets and made sure they were at ride height, that they're at the same angle. It's about 83.5, 83.6 degrees. And ideally that would be vertical, I think. Guys, I've never built a sway bar before, so I'm working off of what I think works for certain things. But what I also want to do is it's leaning forward when it's doing that. And so what I've been wanting to do is drill at least one more hole in here. So I think that will bring it back to near vertical, or maybe slightly aft when it's in that hole at ride height. And like I said, this is at full droop. That's roughly ride height right there. And you can see what I was talking about. There's just a slight bit of angle there. So we're in good shape on those fronts. And then, you know, and you'll see how, right now I don't have these pinned. I've got the collar tack welded to the arm, but there's plenty of room there now. That's all the way against the bump stops. And I think I'm gonna have to build a spacer under these bump stops, because I think we're like a 1/4 inch higher than the shocks will allow the whole thing to come up. So once we get the actual shocks here without springs on them, we can jack it up, see where everything fits, and then we'll adjust the bump stops accordingly. There you go. We've got everything pretty much under the frame rail, so as long as this doesn't hit the bottom of the bed, we're in great shape. And we're gonna, I guess, hope that it doesn't. All right, so with the first one, first pin, what I did was get my measurement, mark it with a marker, and then I've got one of these V-groove drill guides that you mount on there, and I got the first hole drilled, and I'll do the same thing on the other end. But what I've done now is I reassembled the whole thing in the truck and got everything in place, and then from underneath took a drill and just drilled down through the collar just a little bit to just dimple the sway bar. And so now I'm going to drill that out just a little bit more. Once I'm sure I've got that centered up, then I'll put this drill guide back on there, clamp it in, and drill that out all the way through this bar, put the rod back, or put the arm back on, and then drill down into, using all the holes as a guide, drill all the way down into this collar on the other end. So I hope that makes sense, but let me just... All right, so I guess I didn't have the camera going. I basically slid all these pieces up on the bar, pulled this through this side, then back into that side, because I already had this piece pinned on. Otherwise you could slide it all the way through. And then laid it back over, drove my pin in, and the roll pins that are 1/4 inch roll pins, they come with the kit, and drove that in, and then that's it. So I did put some grease on there. I did put some grease for poly bushings in there. And this is Energy Suspension, and their part number is 9.11104. It's a 5-ounce tub. I've had this stuff for years. It just lasts a long time, and I do enough that it's worth buying it in that quantity, but you can buy it in small little tubes and have it, and then with that, it sticks really not, I mean, it sticks to the parts really well, so we're in good shape there. So next up is just to spray paint this, spray paint the axle. Our new actual pieces to make the links should be in, I think, by the end of the week. And then while I had it all apart, I went ahead and drilled a second hole so we can decrease the leverage against the bar, So we'll start out with it on the furthest out, which gives the most leverage. It's kind of like the softest way to run this. This is a 3/4 inch piece of bar, and with that, you know, if he finds he needs a little more sway bar when he's driving, he can move to this second hole. He could also drill a third hole. After that, you'd have such an angle here that you'd probably want to just look at changing up the bar. Now, the pieces of tubing that we've welded into the frame are large enough they can accept a different bushing, and you could put a 1-inch bar in there. And Welder series or Paul Horton's, they sell a 1-inch kit as well. And with that, you would get new arms, a new sway bar, and new bushings. In our case, we wouldn't have to change the sleeves. We'd just duplicate the rest of this, and then you would use the same links and just start over with a thicker bar and start out at the very end. Start soft and see what you needed. The truck never had a sway bar, so just that is going to change, you know, some of the handling characteristics in addition to all the other stuff we've done. So guys, I think we're finally ready to order our shocks, and we've pretty much decided we're going with Viking brand. They have a couple different setups in the valving within the shocks, so you can get one that's dead soft for just like a street cruiser. You can get one that's, you know, next level up, and we want one that is double adjustable so we can adjust rebound and compression. And we want one that will allow us to not only drive this on the street comfortably, but go hit the occasional pro touring day, track day, whatever, and, you know, be able to have some adjustability and confidence in what we're doing. With that, we also have to pick a spring. And I ran some calculations, and now I'm just going off the top of my head here, but I think the number we came up with was like 182 pounds per inch each side. The springs we're going to be using are 14 inches long, so they don't make a 182 pound spring. But you can buy a 175 pound spring, or you can buy a 200 pound spring. I think we're better off to go with a 200 pound spring in that instance, so that we are a little stiffer, a little firmer shock or spring rate than going light. It is a pickup. You do want to be able to put, you know, a dorm fridge in it or something. But more than that, I don't think we want to go soft, and then you got to really put a lot of preload on the spring to hold the truck up. I think we would be better off to be a little heavier on the spring rate and being able to, you know, let more of the spring work rather than compressing it just to get the truck into the air. So that's what I think. But I don't do a lot of suspension setup. I mean, it's the first time I've ever done a 3-link. I'm reading, studying, I watch YouTube videos, and I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to do the right thing for my brother in that I get him a really nice product that he can go out and enjoy and have some tunability in. So that's where I'm at. I hope we're picking right. If you guys know, please comment below. Let me know what your opinion is. Hey, should we go with a lighter spring or heavier spring? But, you know, this video will come out, and within a few days I'll probably be ordering, but we're not in that big a hurry because I still have to build all the front suspension. So anyway, let me get some spray paint and get this painted up, and then we'll get the fuel tank in. And, well, I got to run this wiring, put some coating on here. Thank goodness I didn't melt all the wires, so got lucky on that. But we'll run it and just get it back in behind everything, and then back to where it was originally. It's just all your tail lights and everything. But once all that's done and the fuel tank's back in, we can put the bed back on and hope that I haven't miscalculated in how far these can come up, which is only about there, but it leaves about a ½ inch sticking above the frame. So we'll see. Pretty awesome little chamfering tool. Just knocks the edge off. Makes it pretty comfortable. You know, you're not going to cut your hand on anything. And then, like always, I'm using my Sure Shots. This one has brake clean in it, and clean everything off so I can get it painted. Alright guys, well I've set the bed back on, and I'll kind of stand off here in a minute and let you see that. But you can see right here, I made everything tight enough that this just clears. But we need to kind of just cut a notch out so that it won't rattle against the mount that I made for the shock, and will, you know, give a little room for getting the shock in and out of there. So I drilled just a pilot hole here in my fake shock, and I'm just going to use a hole saw in there and cut that out. It'll do a nice little arch which will clear everything, and then we'll clean it up with a rotary tool. I did notice we'll also be able to pull out the sway bar through without taking the bed off, so that's kind of a neat thing that happened. I thought this was going to be just a little bit lower in here. Anyway, the arms do come up, and there's a cross member mounted like right behind this, which was one of the reasons I went where I did with the mount. And the arms on the sway bar do come up and hit that at full droop. So I'm going to mark both sides. We'll lift the bed back off, and we'll notch the rib that goes across there, and go ahead and, you know, weld up a piece, put a piece of pipe in there or whatever, weld it up, cut it off so that it's clean and gives the sway bar enough room to move up. Alright guys, that really is it for the rear suspension. We have to put the shocks on when they get here, and the little links whenever those show up. But everything's built, the bed's back on. I've got to take off the other 3 fender flares, and they have some scars and stuff in them, so we'll get those repainted for Jeremy. And I think we've got a grill that we're going to repaint. And that's it for this, but that's the back end. I'm about to start pulling the A-arms back off the truck and lay those out on my table so that we can start building upper and lower control arms for the front, and that's what you'll see next time. So for now though, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think, if there's another way you'd have done it. Like we talked about the links, you know, first time I built a lot of this stuff. I research it like everybody else and try and do the best job I can with it. So luckily in this case it's my brother, so if we don't get it right, we'll just figure it out and work on it some more. So anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all the other YouTube stuff, and I'll see you again next time on Alice Customs Project Car TV.